So I don't know about you, but I'm not quite happy with the makeup of this panel. We're at a diversity and inclusion event, and I'm going to call out the elephant in the room. We have 5 male, middle-aged people. The last time I sat on a panel like this, I said I would never ever do it again. And this happened in May 2015 in Cardiff, and I was there with 6 white, middle-aged males. Now, what happened back then was I had an intervention. About 20 minutes into the talk, a young lady, very brave young lady called Miranda, put her hand up and said, "Where are the women?" And so I did what I call a panel hack. And I basically hacked the panel. I got her to come up on stage, and she was fantastic. Now, I cleared this with Teresa because I don't want to upset the fact that we don't have a great panel, because we do. But I think it's about diversity of thinking. It's not about diversity of race or creed or colour. It's about our way of thinking about what's going on. And I call myself a practical futurist because I spend a lot of time looking into the future just far enough to know what's coming around the corner. And so I scan things widely. And a couple of weeks ago, I heard the CEO of Deutsche Bank talk about the fact that his workers might be replaced by robots. So I dug deeper into this, and I found the 60-second clip where he mentioned this in detail. Let's have a listen.
When you said that you do have some employees now who are acting as robots,
yes.
How do you think the employees felt about that comment?
I think they know that. And the opportunity that we always talk about internally is upskilling the job, making jobs more satisfying. People who are just mechanically moving paper and numbers around don't have a very fulfilling job, and the career prospects there are not as attractive as they would be if we were able to automate a lot of that production, and then we can add a bit of thinking and a bit of creativity to the role.
How many jobs ultimately, though, do you think are at stake?
It's very hard to say, and that's not avoiding the question. It genuinely is. We need to increase the number of people who face clients and counterparts and external stakeholders, and reduce the number who are focused internally, producing numbers, calculating outputs. For the whole sector, it will be a lot of people over the next 5 to 10 years.
I wish there were more CEOs like John that actually told it like it was. Yeah, if you are behaving like a robot, you're going to get replaced by a robot. But this isn't the first time this has happened. We're in another industrial revolution, but not that long ago, we had the internet revolution. Some of you in the room will be remember the time when you actually typed out a message on carbon copy. For those millennials, CC means carbon copy. There's a piece of carbon paper behind there. You would file it away and it would be sent off, and a couple of days later, they might respond to you. Now, you get it straight onto your mobile. And the revolution before that was the internet, the computer revolution. There's a fantastic movie called Hidden Figures. Who's seen it? It's a really great movie on a number of levels. One, it shows and amplifies STEM and how important STEM is. Secondly, it talks about how humans used to be computers. The room full of people making the calculations about how to get man to the moon were called computers. Then they got this IBM mainframe in because it could actually calculate faster. And the computers, the human computers, thought, my goodness, we're out of a job. But then they realized they needed people to program the computers. So the computers actually took over the computers. Now, I bet a lot of you here are LinkedIn users. Hands up who's not using LinkedIn. Let's do it the other way around. Who's not using LinkedIn? This is the first time. This might be the biggest wall in Europe. That's the first time I've had one person put their hand up. See me afterwards. I'll tell you why you need to be on LinkedIn. Why I love LinkedIn, actually, there's a hidden secret about LinkedIn. There's a function called Who's Viewed Your Profile. Anyone know about it? It's like reverse stalking. So I'll know whether this afternoon any of you looked up my profile to see whether I knew what I'm talking about, and I kind of like that. But LinkedIn every year, given it's the world's largest job site, basically looks at the skills that are needed. And so what LinkedIn do every year in October is they look at the jobs that are needed into the next year. So I haven't got 2017 and 2018 figures just yet, but here are the figures from 2016 into this year. Let's look at some of the roles that are really important. Cloud, stats analyst, and data mining. That's global. Let's just click through another couple of countries. You can see stats, cloud, stats. I think when they put these next figures out, you'll see a rise in blockchain and artificial intelligence. That means that people that don't have those skills are not going to be in the front line for some of these really great jobs. So that's something that should be considered. Now, I want to throw some buzzwords at you. I want to throw a whole lot of names at you. I'm not going to go into any detail. But I want to scare you a bit, because if any of these names on the screen you're not quite sure what they mean, that's a warning sign. Because as your industry moves forward in the next 2 to 3 years, all of these buzzwords will be employed in your industry. And I give talks around the world about digital disruption. I put similar charts on the screen. And I simply say, look, if any of those words don't mean anything, go to Wikipedia. You don't have to put your hand up and say, I don't know what IoT or Insure tech is. Go and research what it means, and then what it means for your industry and your own skills and your role. So if we agree that we're being disrupted, I think it's worth talking about why disruption actually happens, because it's happening everywhere. I think disruption happens because of 3 major forces. First of all, there are high profits. In your industry, there are high profits, there are high barriers to entry. Let's compare that with the taxi industry. In London especially, the cost of doing the knowledge, 3 or 4 years riding around on a motorbike, learning all the streets of London, and a taxi badge, is a barrier to entry. So along comes Uber, along comes all these other startups, and they say, we'll give you an app that does all that for you. So instantly, the monopoly is eaten away. And you could say the same for hotel stays and for movies and all sorts of things. The second reason we get disrupted is because the technology is there. Now, I can actually order anything I want on my mobile, and I have an expectation that it'll come. So the technology is enabling this to change, and that's why things can get disrupted very easily. And third, we all want the change. For years now, I've been able to select my seat on an aircraft before I've flown on it. And a few years ago, at a Hilton hotel, I could not only select the room I was going to stay in, but I could open the door with my mobile. I won't stay anywhere else now because I'm used to that level of, I suppose, laziness, but it saves me up to half an hour at the check-in desk when I travel because I'm not waiting to get something I could already have on my phone. Now, I know this is an insurance industry. I wonder if any of you have heard of Trove. Hands up, a few people? Okay. Trove is real-time insurance. I want to show you a 60-second clip that explains how it works.
I'm leaving my house now. And as I step outside, all of these things with me are fully insured against loss or damage, instantly. That trick I just showed you, that's Trove. Trove is smart insurance. Unlike blanket policies that cover everything at once, Trove helps me protect just the things I care about. All I have to do is swipe to protect. So, if anything happens, just about anything you can imagine, I know my camera's covered. Trove makes it easy to file a claim through the app. I just answer these questions, and Trove handles the rest. And every time I leave my house, things like my laptop and phone are protected. Trove puts me in control of the things I care about, and that's really smart.
That's actually live now in the UK with AXA. And last year they launched with Suncorp in Australia. And sometimes when I show that, people that are unaware that it's actually live go, oh, that'll never happen because the regulation is too hard and you couldn't possibly do real-time insurance, etc., etc. But think back to my disruption model. You're disrupting a market where there are high profits, the technology is there, and consumers expect that level. Now, I did a simple comparison on the website this morning. What was going to cost to insure my Fitbit and my Apple Macbook? For 10p a day, I can have my Fitbit insured with no excess, and for 70 pence a day, I can have my MacBook insured with no excess. That for me is really cool, and sometimes I don't want to insure it because I'm at home all day, and other times I'm out. So that for me, even I, as a 60s child, I'll be 50 next year, I would use that service because it's very, very convenient. But you're not alone. Whole industries are being disrupted. It's not just your industry or banking and finance. Every single industry is being disrupted. And I came across this really interesting report from Deloitte in Australia that looked at what they called short fuse, big bang. What industries along the year would be disrupted in what time, and what would be the impact? Now, the one we want to look at is the top left, short fuse, big bang. Let's see the victims in here. We've got retail, ICT, trade, finance. Oh dear. You're in the sights there. Now, what may worry you even more is that report was actually from 2014. It's already happened. Your industry has already been disrupted, and the Troves of this world will start to eat your lunch, and the insurtechs and the fintechs are going to come in and try and grab that high profit area. So we're talking about diversity, we're talking about inclusion. I want to bring up the notion of digital diversity. Now, what is digital diversity? It is about having the digital thinking available to all levels of an organisation. And I believe you need to start at the top. You need to build a truly digital board, not one like that, that sees the world through a digital lens. Now, I've put this out there, and I reckon you need to have two. This is for non-exec directs on a board, maybe the board of Aviva. You need to have two, because then it isn't, oh, Andrew's just that digital guy, what does he know? The two actually work together, and they see the business through a digital lens. So I think all companies, no matter what industry you're in, need to think about having that diversity of thinking, that digital diversity at the very, very top level. It means when you're trying to reinvent your organisation, the digital non-execs can actually translate all those buzzwords into what it means for your business. I think what you also need to do is to start to think like a startup. Now, I'm lucky in my career. The last 12 years, I spent running 6 startups. I know what it's like to have almost no money, to be having to launch tomorrow, to have no marketing budget. It's riveting and it's exciting, and you get things done very, very quickly. And people don't tell you no, they tell you to go faster. But being a startup in a large organisation means you have to think very differently, and the skills that you need for that organisation also look very different. To have a startup culture, you've got to have small innovation teams. Does your organisation allow that level of flexibility, with people from across the organisation coming together in small, diverse teams? You need a collaboration culture. I'm sure you might use tools like Yammer or Chat or Slack to talk to each other. And what I've seen is that is a fundamental cultural change. To have people want to share what they're doing across the organisation, across industry bounds, is not easy to do. And so to have these skills, you've also got to have the ability to collaborate across time zones and across industries. And you've got to be agile. Those of you that work in software know that agile methodology means you do things very, very quickly. You have what's called 2-week sprints, and you get things done quickly. And then every week you have what's called a scrum meeting, where you actually stand up. There are no seats. We don't want you to sit down. We want you to tell us what you're doing, what are the problems, then go back to doing it. And that is a very different culture. But I think the skills required for that are in all of us, and it is just allowing people to operate in that very agile, very run-quickly way. And organisations like Barclays have done a great job. They've set up a network of offices called RISE. There's one out in Shoreditch. And so these offices, they're in York and Delhi, are essentially like a WeWork. And they're beautiful buildings, and they encourage fintech startups to come in and work with them. They actually rent desks from them. But here's the interesting conundrum. I was there a few weeks ago on the top floor at a barbecue, and they could literally from Shoreditch see Canary Wharf, and they could see the Barclays building. They said, look, that's where all the corporate people are. Hello. And I'm sure at head office they look down to Shoreditch and go, that's where all the funky people are. The two are absolutely physically disconnected. And while these incubators are important, you need to bring the hip, funky people back into the mothership and have the cultures clash and grow. And I'm pleased to see organisations like Aviva have your digital garage, more and more of those, please, because they attract people like me that might have wanted to go and work for Google or Amazon to come and work and share my skills in your industry. Now, I've almost got through a whole presentation without mentioning the M word, that of course is millennials. We have to talk about millennials only because it's a lot of fun. I used to be in a different camp. I used to think millennials were actually given a hard time, and that we tried to put them in a bucket and we tried to say they're all the same. But I'm coming around to some other thinking, and there's a LinkedIn post I saw yesterday that really caught my eye. A guy was saying that he's amazed at how many applications he receives from university graduates looking for their first ever job. Now, I don't know about you, but my first job was working for my father in his electronics company when I was just out of, still working at school. So it meant I went into the workforce knowing what it's like to work with a team, to see the highs and the lows. And maybe, just maybe, millennials aren't having that experience. And so when they get to work, and their parents, of course, tell you that you're wonderful and you can do anything, and you get to work and you're told you're not wonderful and you can't do anything, there are rules. So this is where I think the cultures can come together. And Korn Ferry, the recruitment company, last year did a research paper about the different types of skills you're going to need in businesses of the future. And they talk about 2 different tribes. The first tribe is going digital. Many of the room are represented. We know how to influence in an organisation. We know how to get things done. We know how to get things approved. But we're not up with the latest technology. Then you've got the born digital. Those of us that were born with an iPhone in their mouth and can live and breathe digital, but aren't as experienced and don't know exactly how to push board papers through just yet. I see the two tribes coming together and needing each other. And you need to respect the two tribes exist and allow them to work with each other. Which brings me to not just the type of people we're going to need, but where will work be conducted. We talk a lot about the gig economy, and Uber's in the news at the moment. They will survive. They have litigation built into the business model. They have 3.3 million people that want the service to remain. But you think about people that maybe want a career break, they're in the room right now. When you come back, you may not want a 9-to-5 job. You may want to be a gig worker where you rent your hours and your expertise to an organisation like this one or one of yours on your terms. That'll mean it'll change where we work, it'll change how we work, and you'll see a lot more itinerant workers that run things on their own time. Let me give you one sort of final example of how technology can help the skills debate. Let's look at blockchain. I'm not going to give you a big lecture about what blockchain is. Let's call blockchain a distributed ledger. When I call it that, it then becomes a very different proposition. And next year in the EU is announcing a new policy called Gdpr. Who here knows about Gdpr? It should frighten the pants out of you, but also be a huge opportunity. Because GDPR is bad in that you've got to change the way you deal with customers and what your relationship is. But it's good because I think in the next 3 to 5 years, consumers will actually know how to take control of their own data. A study a couple of years ago put a price on what networks thinks we're worth to them. I haven't seen a check cut yet for all the websites I use, but mark my words, in the near term, blockchain and other technologies will be used so that I control my data. And if I choose to give you some of it from all the different services I use, I will expect a value exchange. I want a discount, I want a better rate, or I want something that's going to make me want to buy your product. So whenever I give these talks, because I'm the practical futurist, I look forward to next week. I'm sure all of you have a team or a staff meeting next week, and I want you to disrupt that meeting. I want you to say this crazy Australian came to give a talk on diversity. He had an elephant in the room, and he told us that we can start disrupting what we're doing. What are the things you're going to do to instill digital diversity? How are you going to educate yourself about the skills you need to stay ahead? And how are you going to have these two tribes come together? One of my mantras is, to get digital, you need to be digital. You need to play with this tech. You can't break it, but you can only ensure that you're not being disrupted. Because I want you to disrupt, or you'll be disrupted. Thank you very much.